right, hear ye, gather round, gather round.
My name is Sue Desjardins, and on behalf of the Board of Governors and the staff of the American Independence Museum, it is my great honor to welcome you to the 27th Annual American Independence Festival. Thank you all for coming. The festival is an enormous undertaking by the museum where we seek to raise awareness, inspire, educate, and celebrate the achievement of America's independence. After months of planning, we are excited to bring you a festival with some tried and true elements as well as new additions this year. For all their hard work, allow me to take just a moment to recognize a few people. Victoria Sue, our festival coordinator. The festival committee, volunteers and interns, our dedicated board and museum staff, the Society of the Cincinnati, members and donors, our local community, the Chamber of Commerce, the town of Exeter, and a tremendously large group of festival volunteers, and of course, all of you. Without this entire group, we would not have a festival. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize a number of local businesses who have enabled us to put on such a spectacular festival this year. Our sponsors provide the funds that allow us to have the reenactors, the interpreters, the artisans, and the musicians, all of whom make the day so rich and so meaningful. So I'd like to recognize our lead festival sponsors: Geico, local office, the New Hampshire Council of the Arts, Heffel Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts, the Service Credit Union, Optima Bank and Trust, and Ruffner Real Estate. We also hold much gratitude to other generous contributors who donated the funds to allow the museum and today's festival to be free to open to active duty retired military members, veterans, and their immediate families who attend with them. Very appropriate. There's a full listing of all corporate and in-kind sponsors on the back of your brochure. We'd also like to thank all our museum members in the crowd. Please join me in thanking all of them. We appreciate all the support we have received and urge you to continue to support the museum and invest in our future as we invest in keeping the past alive. If you're not a member, you can become one today. And now it is my great honor to introduce fellow Museum Board of Governors member of the Select Board, and State Representative Julie Gilman.
I hope those were woos and not boos. I want to thank you, Sue. On behalf of the town of Exeter, I would also like to give my thanks to the museum, the sponsors, and all of you for being part of this special day of independence and celebration of our journey back in time. The museum is honored to be able to share some words of greeting from a few of our esteemed public officials. Senator Maggie Hassan shares, "The town of Exeter plays an important role in our American story. John Gilman's reading of the New Hampshire copy of the Declaration of Independence on July 16, 1776, right here in Exeter, marked the beginning of our journey as a free nation. This festival allows us to recapture this important part of Exeter's history and to continue the historic and cultural traditions that defines our country's vibrant democracy and values." Senator Jean Shaheen contributes, "In this way, the rich history of the town of Exeter and state of New Hampshire is brought to life as the public is reminded of the importance of both the history itself and its continued preservation."
Imagine that it's July 16, 1776. 2 weeks ago, the Continental Congress voted in Philadelphia to secede from the British. Now, you don't know what to make of this. Some of your neighbors are patriots, some of them loyalists, and some of them are just neutral. What will this mean for New Hampshire and for the rest of the sister colonies? You've heard that a declaration was written in Philadelphia, a Declaration of Independence. But what will it say? What will the British think? Will it put an end to this conflict that's happening right now? You're awaiting the document's arrival here in Exeter, along with eager townsfolk, when suddenly you hear in the distance the beating of hooves on the cobblestones.
Good morning. We have here a dispatch from the Continental Congress. It says as follows: in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole means of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed forces among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
All right. So, after we attained our independence and we won the Revolutionary War, after many years of the formation of our new government, our nation's first president visited the town of Exeter and stopped at our own Folsom Tavern on November 4th, 1798, to thank individuals for their support in the founding of our new nation. And I think I see President George Washington approaching now. Let's welcome our nation's first president.
citizens of New Hampshire. I remember those days well. So much has transpired since our former days of British rule, since John Taylor Gilman read our Declaration. As I look upon this fair town, I am reminded that it was not so long ago when it had yet to be determined whether Americans would be free men or slaves, whether they were to have any property which they could call their own, whether their houses and farms would be pillaged and destroyed and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness from which no human efforts would deliver them. I see among you faces of children who are too young to know that their fate and those of unborn millions depended on the courage and conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy left us the only choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We therefore resolved to conquer or die. Nothing short of independence could possibly do. A peace under any other terms would have been, if I may allow the expression, a peace of war. The injuries we received from the British nation were so unprovoked and had been so great and so many that they will never be forgotten. For were we to easily accede to terms of dependence, no nation, upon future occasions, let the oppressions of Britain be so flagrant and unjust, would interpose for our relief, or at most they would do it with a cautious reluctance. France, by her generous supplies, had saved us from the yoke thus far, and a wise and virtuous perseverance would free us entirely. And so we took to war, as harsh as any that had come before. Following our heroic war for independence, we strove to form a more perfect union, ever vigilant of danger that in all times may be posed by tyrannical rule. For government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and fearful master. To secure our freedoms, we set to work to create a new constitution, to protect our new won liberties. We must still work together for the common good and stand together to protect our rights. If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to slaughter. If the right to bear arms is taken away, then we lose our ability to defend those same freedoms. Indeed, it may be laid down as a primary position and the basis of our system that every citizen who enjoys the protection of a free government owes his personal services to the defense of it. And consequently, that the citizens of America, with a few legal and official exceptions from 18 to 50 years of age, should be born on the militia rolls, provided with uniform arms and so far accustomed to the use of them that the total strength of the country might be called forth at a short notice on a very interesting emergency. It was also recommended to the proposed Constitution that it be provided with more checks and barriers against the introduction of tyranny than any government hitherto instituted among mortals hath possessed. Let the reins of government then be braced and held with a steady hand, and every violation of the Constitution be reprehended. If defective, let it be amended, but not suffering to be trampled upon whilst it has an existence. I do regret, my fellow citizens, that I must now depart your fine company, as duty calls me to continue on my journey. Thank you for your kind and mostly most gracious attention and hospitality to this humble servant.